Yorkshire Quartet. They're not going to be doing a song. You didn't like the colour of that chair, Sal? That was a bit upsetting for you? Okay, you're in the red chair. All right. Now, we're going to do this as a bit of a Q&A, and we've got 2 microphones, which I think is sitting over there somewhere. I think, Nigel, you've got one. Is that the only one we've got? Okay, if it's only one we've got, that's fine. You'll just have to share, but...
It's going to be cranked up in a minute.
Okay, we're getting another one up as well. Okay, well, I'll stay up here so I don't actually have to use one of those microphones. So we're going to do this as a bit of a conversation. And you've heard from Leeds, and we've got a couple of people from Leeds, and I think even with the change up, we've got a couple of people from Hull. Is that right? No, maybe not. Anyway, actually, what I might do is, Estelle, can I start with you? So we're going from Leeds over to Hull, which I think geographically is moving east of Leeds. Have I got that right?
That's right.
Thank God. So Estelle, I wonder if you could just actually tell us a little bit about the Hull Collaborative Academy Trust and the work you do there.
Sure. So I wonder if I should tell the whole story. I'll tell you the story.
Just give us the good bits.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how it all began, because that sort of links in with what Nigel's just talked about. So I took on a school in Hull, the new head teacher that was in special measures. Hull is a very deprived city, a lot of poverty, and it's a city that has no kind of green areas really. It's the boundaries. It's how would you describe it, Nigel? Okay. Anyway, I took on the school in special measures. Special measures means a school that is failing in every aspect, and there's always a consideration when a school's in special measures whether it's closed or allowed to continue. And they put me in there to try and sort it out. And I went in as a very I like to think a young head teacher, a middle class, obviously white woman into a very mixed and different community, wondering how I was going to best serve it really, and went in with a set of values and beliefs that I now recognise as restorative, but I've come from a family, 2 teachers, my brother's a social worker, did a lot of talking about what was right and how you treat people and what relationships work. And so I went into this school and worked really on a values-driven leadership and a set of values to bring the community back together. Very disjointed, dysfunctional community, very unhappy community with this failing school at the centre, and worked very hard. And quickly the school came out of special measures, worked with some fantastic teachers and parents and children, and the school very quickly came out of special measures. When you've been in special measures in the UK, Ofsted come back, and 2 years after you've come out of special measures, they come back and check on you. And Ofsted came back to the school and judged the school to be outstanding, which put us in the top 10% of schools in the country, which understandably attracted an awful lot of interest because of the context of the school and its history, and the context of Hull. And when the inspector came and judged the school to be outstanding, she left me with a challenge, and that was to articulate and to find out and to develop some sort of framework for practice so I could support other schools and communities in change really and in improvement. And that was a very significant challenge for me, a very significant life kind of changing moment, because a number of things happened after that. The first thing was I did go and talk to, first of all, my family, my brother, and said, these are the sort of things I've been doing in school. How would you frame this? What would you call it? And he said, I think what you're doing is called restorative practice. Go and find out more about that. So I did, went all over the place finding out about that from other experts across the world. And the second thing that happened was that Nigel Richardson, who was Director of Children and Young People Services at the time, decided to come and see me to find out how this transformation had occurred, and had the humility to sit with me and talk to me and teachers and children and staff about what the school was like now and what sort of journey it had been on. And he really got it straight away and really understood the sort of things we've been doing. So he turned around with another challenge and said, Estelle, what if we could do this on a bigger scale? What if we could work with a small community in the city of Hull, an area in the city of Hull, work with all the schools, all the police, all the social workers, anyone who touches the lives of children and young people, and work with them in this way, and work with them in a restorative way. What if we could do that? And so together, we started a very significant movement, really, which was a project, and out of it came Hull Centre for Restorative Practices and some fantastic early outcomes in Hull, not just in schools, but in youth justice, with the police, in social care, but very significant changes and differences that were starting to have a real impact. But I'm an educator, and my real passion and interest, remains in education, and the story of Collingwood and that beginning has gone on and on. And I am now CEO of Hull Collaborative Academy Trust, so I have I influence 14 schools across the city, got another 5 in the pipeline, and we are a restorative education organisation. And we have, the measures have just come out about a month before I came here, and we are in the top 10% of academy trusts in the country, which is a significant achievement.
Fantastic. So, that's a fantastic overview. So we'd say from small things, big things grow, and it clearly has happened. I just want to delve a little bit into restorative practice and what it looks like, in the school ground, perhaps, even at that level, to sort of understand how are children and how are parents involved in restorative ways or restorative practice within the classroom. And I'll open that up to anyone on the panel who's able to speak about that.
Okay, I'll say briefly, but what it looks like in my school is we start the day with a staff circle. So we talk with all the staff in the school about how they're feeling and what the day is going to look like, what are our challenges for today. From that, when the children come into school, they all come into their classes and they come into a class circle. Similar experience, every child has a voice. We talk about how they're going to cope with the day and what's that like. The end of the day, they have a circle. And throughout the day, anything that happens, any conflict or any problem is dealt with in a restorative way. So it might be that they circle up on their own as children, or they with their teacher, or with an emotional well-being worker. We have a set of values and behaviours that we've agreed. So working with, what does that look like? We teach that to staff, children and to parents. How we are going to do things in a fair way, so how we call it fair process. We use restorative language, so we teach teachers and children how to express emotions appropriately and to communicate their feelings and their needs. So lots of different ways. It would take me all day to train you, but that's sort of a feel of
that's for another time, but that's a great little overview. And outside of school settings, did somebody else want to sort of pick that up in terms of the context that they're working in? Because I think the restorative practice has been a cornerstone of probably all of the change that we've been talking about, Nigel was talking about earlier too. Sal?
I heard you ask me a question about how do we do this in children's services.
That's right, that's exactly what I was about to ask. So very good.
If I take you back to a couple of reference points that from Nigel's presentation. One is the 2009 inspection by Ofsted. And I've worked in Leeds for nearly 25 years, so I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly in that period of time in that organisation. And 2009 was a particularly difficult time. And once a regulatory body like Ofsted has been and said the things that it had about how we were failing in terms of keeping children safe, there is a reaction that takes place, and I think Nigel described quite a lot of that. However, there is something about the fact that our social care practice at the time was of a punitive nature. So if you think back to, again, Nigel's presentation where he presented the social discipline window, quite a lot of our social work practice was about doing things to people or doing things for people, or not doing anything at all. It wasn't in the with box. And that became quite a significant challenge for us, because on top of making children central, the other aspect that Nigel talked about was how we effectively used the broadest sense of family in order to support positive outcomes for children. And we wanted to move to using something called family group conferencing, which is much more about family-led decision making. And how we get organisations to support families to come up with sustainable solutions to the difficulties that they are facing. And Sharon helped us to implement and expand our family group conferencing service to the point last year where it is now an entitlement in Leeds for families to be offered a family group conference prior to formal processes like child protection conferences or care proceedings being invoked by the state, which mirrors the position in New Zealand, where some of the philosophy and thinking from the Maori culture and other indigenous cultures comes from. But in order to do that, we had a workforce that was working in a punitive way. We had rising numbers of children coming into the care system. We had more and more children being made subject to formal child protection plans, and we wanted to move to this position where actually we reduced the need for children to be in care, we reduced the need for them to be part of formal child protection plans, but working from a philosophical viewpoint that was really about our values of family and trying to empower families to take much more control. And so we had to do a huge amount of work around the culture of the organisation and the leadership within the organisation, because we believed that we couldn't just move to having that entitlement that we talked about around FGCs without changing the culture of the organisation. And in order to change the culture of the organisation, we had to do a lot of work ourselves on the leadership within the organisation. And we believe that there's a direct link between what the culture of the organisation looks like and how leaders and people within organisations and professionals behave, and how our frontline staff behave when they interact with children and families.